I always say, as an artist, as a creative, you reach a point where it's harder to keep something to yourself than it is to share it with the world. And I think that's with any gift or talent. It literally becomes hard to hoard it for yourself. And a perfect example of that is with my first single that I ever released, Golden Girl. Before I ever got in the studio to record it, everywhere I went, I would sing that song. I would be in a public restroom just singing it at the top of my lungs. And the person in the next stall would be like, "Hey, what song are you singing?" I'm like, "Oh, it's a song I wrote." So I couldn't stop singing it. And I was like, okay, I need to do something with it because it doesn't make sense for only me to hear it and random strangers when I'm singing in public.
Right.
So I think that was part of it. And, once I decided, okay, I'm going to make an album, then the question is, okay, well, what are my next steps?
Welcome to the Luxury State of Mind podcast, where we focus on intentionally crafting a life that feels tailor-made for you. On each episode, you'll learn how to create luxury in your everyday life and celebrate the uniqueness that is you. I'm your host, Damio Shodi, and I'm excited to help you develop a luxury state of mind. Welcome to the Luxury State of Mind show. I'm your host, Damio Shodi, and on this podcast, the goal is to help you live in luxury every single day of your life. So when we speak about luxury, living a meaningful life. And this is going to be the first episode where I feature a guest on Luxury State of Mind. And I'm going to be sharing with you somebody who, in my own life, I've really seen live out this luxury type of lifestyle. And what I mean by luxury, basically a meaningful life. So I have the opportunity to have a front row seat to the way that she lives and to learn from her on how to craft a life that is meaningful for you. So I get to introduce to you today my friend Vinessa Burnett. So just a little bit about Vinessa. Vinessa works in human resources by day and unleashes her passion as a gifted singer, songwriter, and musician at night. And her music traverses the realms of alternative, R&B, pop, rock, folk, and draws listeners in through her heartfelt melodies and raw emotive lyrics. This one-of-a-kind sound reflects her unique journey from the shores of South Florida to the vibrant musical scene of Dallas, Texas. And Vinessa recently just released a highly anticipated debut album called Prime. She released this on July 23rd, 2024, to much praise and positive reception. So definitely stay tuned as Vinessa continues to evolve and redefine musical expectations. So you're going to get to know all about Vinessa and how she's been able to do her day job by day in HR and also live out her passions of being a singer-songwriter in her free time and all the other things that she gets to do and loves to do. So we're really going to dive into today how you can craft a luxury life while you are doing your day-to-day work and doing your day-to-day things. So if you're curious on how you can continue to make life more meaningful and really live out your interests and make life really exciting for you, then you'll love this episode and you'll learn a lot from Vinessa during this whole episode as well. So let's jump into the episode. So thank you guys for tuning in to the Luxury State of Mind podcast. I'm your host, Damio Shodi. And on this podcast, we talk about living in luxury every single day of your life. So I always say on every episode, it doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter where you've come from or even how much money you have in your bank account right now. You can live in luxury today. And when we speak about luxury, it's more speaking towards living a meaningful life. So this is exciting because this is going to be the first episode that I have a guest on the podcast, especially on the Luxury State of Mind podcast. And I'm super excited to introduce her to you. She's a dear friend of mine, a mentor of mine in so many ways, and just an amazing person overall. So I have the pleasure of introducing to you Vinessa Burnett.
Thank you so much, Dami. I appreciate that intro, and thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm so excited from being a listener of the podcast to now getting a chance to speak on it. Nice. Happy to be here.
No, it's definitely exciting to have you on. And we're just talking before I hit record, or recorded this episode, about kind of the intention that I had for this episode, and something that you've actually taught me just from your own personal life, which is building a life that is meaningful, and doing it with all the different things that you have going on. You're very versatile in different things in different areas. So we're definitely going to talk about that. And my hope is that this just encourages somebody out there to think bigger for what to do with their life, and they can have different passions and have different interests and all these different things in life. They don't have to stay pigeonholed to just one thing. Life is meant to be explored and valued. So before we get into the conversation and all that, I just want to, hear from you. Who is Vinessa in your own words? Who are you? And just share about yourself.
Yeah. Who is Vinessa? I am a dreamer and a doer. I feel like I am someone who has a lot of ideas, and it brings me joy to see those ideas come to life. And so I think that's me in a theoretical sense. But as far as what I do on a day to day and whatnot, by day I work in human resources, and outside of my day job, I enjoy music, of course, which I know we'll get into throughout the course of this podcast. I sing, I songwrite, and I play guitar and piano. I'm also a runner. So running is a hobby that I've really dived in head first over the past couple years, from running 5Ks and 10Ks to even my first half marathon last year. It's a sport that I truly enjoy. And then I think outside of that, also love to travel and spend time with family and friends and just take advantage of opportunities to get out of the house, try something new. I would say that, that speaks to the core of who I am.
Yep. And I've had the opportunity to witness you do all of those things. I always say you're the biggest advocate for the Run Club. Like,
shout out to the Run Club. I was part of Run Clubs before they were like a cool thing to be a part of. I just want to make that clear. Or before they were like a social/dating club.
I'm always like, there's the main marketer right there. Always inviting me, like, let's go run, let's go for a run. And I'm just like, I just want to go dance. But no, it's so fun. It's so fun being able to witness you do all of these things and do it so well. And one of the things I want to know, and then I'm sure somebody listening is like, girl, how do you do all that? Like, how do you create that life, especially a life that is meaningful for you, and you're able to have all of these different activities with a full-time job?
Yeah, great question. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the role that my parents have had in that. So from as young as I can remember, my parents always had me, and I have two younger brothers. Mm-hmm. We were always in a number of different activities. And honestly, I don't know how they did it because they worked full time. We were in school. Me and my brothers, I have one that's 3 years younger than me and one that's 11 years younger than me. And we were always involved in something. So whether it was sports, at one point I was in sewing lessons, I was in public speaking lessons, theater, music lessons, choir. And then same for my brother. Like, we all took music lessons. And so I definitely have to give credit to my parents for, from a young age, making sure that we were always in some sort of activity. And they didn't really let us quit. But I think it's very important, right? Because if you talk to a lot of people, they're like, oh yeah, I took piano lessons when I was a kid. But they quit before they ever had a chance to get good at it. And so that's one thing I appreciate about my parents, even though at the time I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot stand piano. Like, why do I have to keep going if I don't like it? Why are you wasting your money? But they made sure that we got involved in things and stayed until we at least got somewhat satisfactory in it before they gave us the opportunity to back out. So with that foundation in mind, I think how that manifests now as an adult is it feels weird for me to not have things going on outside of work. Like, I don't know what that is like to just go to work, go home, watch Netflix, and go to sleep. because I'm wired now to always have other things going on. I think the tricky part is how do you fit that into your schedule? And I think for me, it's really a matter of just priorities. Work is not my priority because work is always going to be there, and it's the means through which I'm able to pay my bills and afford my lifestyle. Yes. But being able to express myself through my hobbies and interests, to utilize my gifts and talents in ways that I never thought possible, I think there's so much more meaning and satisfaction in that even though I can get some of that through my day job, I think my life would feel like it was missing something if I didn't pursue those things outside of work. And it just kind of creates a domino effect where once you get going, it's hard to stop because you're just so involved and so committed to these things that bring you joy on a consistent basis.
Right. There are a couple things that I got from what you said. First thing is, for real though, shout out to your parents for putting you in all those activities. And I noticed that because even looking at my own life too, being a figure skater and doing that for about 10 years, when you develop certain habits, especially when you're young, I mean, it's a lot easier to maintain those habits in the sense of being able to do something and to finish it, right? But even as adults, we can still train ourselves to be that way, even if that wasn't our start or our beginning, because maybe some people didn't have those opportunities to be able to do that. But the beauty of life now, especially as an adult, and one of the principles of luxury state of mind is freedom of choice. We have the ability to choose differently now. We have the ability to think differently than before, because maybe for somebody listening, they're like, well, all I do is just sit at home and watch Netflix. That's the way that I spend my time, or I scroll on TikTok. But it's a matter of being able to now train yourself to think, or train yourself and to think, what else can I do? What other passions, what other interests do I have? And I think what also I'm curious about as well is, how did you determine what you value? Because really you're moving based off of your values. Because a lot of people, we want to do a lot of things, right? But really what we prioritize is what we actually value. So how do you determine the values of how you want to live?
Yeah. Wow. That is such a powerful and very pointed question. How do I determine the values that I have and base my life accordingly? Um, so my grandpa died in 2019, and he is somebody that I looked up to in every single area of my life. He was a pastor, he was a carpenter, he was a craftsman, as he would like to say. Almost all the furniture in his house he built, including in my house, the bed frame I slept on, my bookshelf. Very masterful woodworker. He was also a professor at a seminary, musician. The list goes on and on. But the point I'm trying to make is he used every ounce of talent and gifting that he had to the maximum. And when he got sick and wasn't getting better, a conversation that my grandma shared with the family is, at one point, my grandpa asked her, why isn't God making me better? Why isn't he healing me? And my grandma asked him, if you were given more time, what else would you do that you haven't already done?
Wow.
And he couldn't answer it. He had literally used every ounce of talent and gift he had, and had used it to serve and better others. And, not too long after that, he ended up passing. But that really stays with me. And I think, going back to the question of, what are my values? To me, it's important to, what I call, die empty, meaning die having poured out and used up every ounce of gifting and talent that I have. And it doesn't even have to be in the traditional sense, right? Running, for example, some people might not think of that as a gift or a talent, but it's something that I not only have interest in, but I have some level of ability in that I can run at a long distance without stopping. Even if I'm not directly helping people by running, you never know how, just by using your gift or talent, you're inspiring people, right? I'm probably not saving any lives when I cross the finish line at a 5K, but it's inspiring other people to get healthy, to get active,
Right.
and to find joy outside of work and things that they can be good at, right? And that has impact, that carries weight. And so going along those lines of values, how do I continue to make sure that whether it's through my day job or outside of it, that I am doing what I need to do so that way I can die empty. So that way, if at the end of my life, I'm like, okay, I've used everything I got. Like, even if I had more time, I couldn't even pour anything else out because I've been doing that my whole entire life. And I think that's just been my guiding principle throughout my life since then.
Wow. No, that I love that. Because that in itself is a value. Wanting to die empty, being able to give life everything that you have, because it is so easy. There's so many distractions. I feel like in life that can deplete your time, your energy, even the little things that happen during the day, right? A random bill comes, you know, traffic is way too much. It depletes your energy. But when you're able to stay focused like this, like, and that can, you know, encourage somebody that's listening that maybe a value for you is to do everything that you feel called to do, everything that you have the ability to do in the time that you have, to use your body, to use your mind, your talents, everything about yourself so you can live fully. And like you said, it's inspiring others. And, you know, even with running, that is inspiring others because I know, like literally, especially with the running, I know they're like, oh, like everybody's like, oh, Vinessa, go to Vinessa for running it. Or, oh, she inspires me. Like I actually hear stuff like that when we go out and I'm talking to people, like they talk about how inspiring that you are. And that does something. And really what that does is it shows people a picture of what can be, what is possible. Sometimes the impact that we want to make is not always, you know, you're building a well in a country or you're taking care of orphans. That can be somebody's way of impacting people. But in the way that you live, the way that you orchestrate your life is a ministry on its own, which I just love. And I love the story that you shared.
And I love how you just phrased that because I think in some ways that is the most authentic way to help people because you're not even doing it with the intention of helping people, right? You are just living your life in the best way you know how. And that on its own is liberating other people to do the same. And so that is life-changing work whenever each of us decides to tap into who we know ourselves to be and to fully live that out. So yeah, I really love how you phrase that too.
Yeah, no, that's very true as well. And I know somebody's like, dang, like, how do you make time for all that? So, okay, you run, you sing, you play the piano, you travel. Like, how do you prioritize all of those things into your busy schedule? How do you make sure what you value is a priority despite, you know, the normal everyday things that we experience?
Yeah. You know, it's funny. People outside looking in think that I'm such a like structured, disciplined person, like schedules every single thing and wakes up early and hits the ground running. I wish I was that way. Unfortunately, I am not. I live off of
Okay.
my schedule is a mix of like vibes and some like force structure that I have to put in order for things to get done. It's still something I'm working out. But I think when you do things that you enjoy, right, outside of work, one, I don't have to force myself to do them, right? So for anyone that's looking for a new hobby or trying to explore your gifts or passions, if you find that you are forcing yourself to do those things, that may not be the hobby for you, or at least not initially. So I will say it does come naturally to me to sometimes sit at the piano or go for a run after work. Um, and then I think just there are times when I do have to plan and be intentional. And so that's when scheduling in the calendar comes in handy, as well as finding um, other people that are doing the same thing. So being part of a run club has been very helpful. Working with a producer, meeting other musicians has also been very helpful for me because now you have other people that can kind of come alongside you and say, hey, I haven't seen you at Run Club in a while. Like, where have you been at? Or, hey, want to go for a run this weekend? I think that's also been very helpful. And then I think last thing I'll say too is I feel very off balance when I don't do the things that bring me joy and that I know I'm supposed to be doing, right? If work is super crazy and I'm not making time to sit at the piano or guitar or go for a run or get outdoors, like I like mentally start to feel like I'm drowning. Like I feel like I'm suffocating. And so even having those checks and balances with myself to say, wait a minute, like you feel flustered. You are running yourself into the ground with something that doesn't even excite you and bring you joy. How do you get back centered?
Right. Man. No, that's good. That's good. Because yeah, it's so easy, especially if you like, it's so easy to continue to keep moving in a way that's just not benefiting you, especially if you feel like, oh, I need to achieve that thing, or I need to, climb this ladder, or that is what I should go after. And you don't value the things that you actually value. So, in speaking about community and you being able to do all these passions with other people and they inspire you and help you along your journey. That actually leads me into the next thing that you've been able to achieve. You alluded to it earlier, but I want the people to know that your girl over here is an artist. She created her own album, wrote her songs, played the piano, guitar, all the instruments for her album, and had a release party, which we had the opportunity to celebrate with her. And it was an amazing thing. And why I say that community piece is because you didn't do it alone. You had the opportunity to work with a producer, and you also had your friends to be able to support you. And even, I believe you said an artist encouraged you. So I guess this is like more like a maybe two-part thing. What inspired you to create this project? Because it was a very massive project, right? So kind of give us the details there. And then how did that support from others really assist you on your journey to completing that project?
Wow, I love both questions. The first question, what inspired me to create an album? It's such a loaded question.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if anyone ever sets out and says, okay, I'm going to make an album and then starts writing the songs. But last summer, summer of 2023, one of my friends was visiting me, and she just, as part of our normal friend combo, we were just talking about our goals and dreams. And I had this idea of uh, recording a song that I had written back in 2021, just because I wrote a song, I really like it. And I was like, it'd be nice to record this in the studio and make a music video for it. And my friend was like, okay, I want you to think bigger. What is like the craziest, biggest dream that you could accomplish this year? If you really put your mind to it, like don't think about what's realistic or what's possible, go crazy.
Wow.
And I was like, well, I have written enough songs to put together an album. So I guess the craziest, biggest goal or dream would be to make an album. And so I think that conversation with my friend really helped plant the seed. And at times I've thought about making an album in the past, but I feel like that conversation made it real because that was my first time really saying it out loud to someone who could then hold me accountable, which is something we've talked about before, right? Because now every time I talk to her, so when are you going to make that album? And I'm like, dang it, like, why did you trick me into saying that?
Right.
And I always say, as an artist, as a creative, you reach a point where it's harder to keep something to yourself than it is to share it with the world. And I think that's with any gift or talent. It literally becomes hard to hoard it for yourself. And a perfect example of that is with my first single that I ever released, Golden Girl. Before I ever got in the studio to record it, everywhere I went, I would sing that song. I would be in a public restroom just singing it at the top of my lungs. And the person in the next stall would be like, hey, what song are you singing? I'm like, oh, it's a song I wrote. So like I couldn't stop singing it, and I was like, okay, I need to do something with it because it doesn't make sense for only me to hear it and random strangers when I'm singing in public.
Right.
So I think that was part of it. And once I decided, okay, I'm going to make an album, then the question is, okay, well, what are my next steps? So the first thing I did was I reached out to a musician friend I knew, and I said, hey, his name is Lottie. I was like, hey, Lottie, I think I'm ready to make an album. What do I do now? And it's so important to have people like that have done the things that you're doing or are already doing them, that you can call upon and say, hey, like, I really need you to break it down for me. Like, literally, what is the next step? And he was like, okay, well, why don't you come over and we'll track some demos. We'll workshop your songs so that way before you even go to a producer, you have an idea or a concept of how you want the songs to sound. And that'll help you pick out the right producer that can accomplish that sound and they can hear your demos and so forth. And I was like, okay, sounds good. So I go over to his place and we spend some time just workshopping the songs, practicing them, testing out different ideas with the songs. And before you know it, I had some demos and he referred me to one of his bandmates who is a producer who ended up being my producer. And the rest is really history, right? I set up time with the producer. And for a year straight, I was driving to and from Dallas to Fort Worth every week to go and record that album. And my producer, Aaron, so amazing. He held my hand every step of the way and helped get things to the finish line when, I wasn't doing what I was supposed to and vice versa. I think we worked really well together, but that really is how the album came about. And I think underscoring all of that, it felt like something I was supposed to be doing in this season of my life. Like there was so much confirmation just all throughout the process of coming up with Prime. I started seeing the word Prime everywhere I went. Everywhere I went, new restaurants opening up with that name, businesses, billboards. It's like the word Prime just kept jumping out at me, which is the name of the album. And it just let me know that I was on the right track. And then when it comes to the support of friends, I already gave that example of Lottie, my musician friend, being the first person I called to say, hey, what do I do next? But my friends played a huge role in, like, down to the actual songs on the album. 3 of my friends sang background vocals on 2 of my songs, and they did an amazing job. So shout out to Nneka, David, Calvin, and Ugo. Oh, wow, 4 of my friends. That's 4 people. And they did such a phenomenal job with that. And I didn't have to tug and pull for them to do that either. And then when it came time to plan my album release party, I had friends offer to help out with that as well. Well, it was a mix of me asking them and them also offering. But yeah, I had friends help out with planning the party too. So I'm very grateful for that.
Wow. There's a couple of things that I want to just, I guess, highlight in what you said and what I heard in regards to making such a big dream come to fruition. I think the first thing is that you asked for help when you didn't know what to do at the beginning, right? Or you wanted to know your next steps. And I mention that because we may have a dream that we want to accomplish or a big project or goal, and we set out to do it by ourselves. We don't ask for help, and maybe we don't even know who to ask, right? That could also be a big thing. But you were resourceful. You looked within your network. Who can I talk to? You didn't say, oh, well, it's not possible because I don't have every answer in front of me today. You decided to think, okay, who else? Like, who could I speak with? How can I get curious enough to even try this out, to try this idea out? And you were able to then find somebody who was able to direct you. And then that person connected you to your producer. It's not like you knew the producer beforehand. It's because you were curious and willing to ask for help. The resources started coming. And then also with your friends being able to support you, because that's a big thing too, because it can be like, oh, well, I want things to be, it's not like they were professional singers. It's just that they cared for you and they wanted to see you succeed. And you use, again, being resourceful with the resources, with the people and your talents and all those things around you to be able to push this thing forward, and even to planning the party. I know that some of your friends were definitely a huge part in planning and helping you execute. So I just want to encourage somebody out there, and I point out those things, that the dream that you have may not necessarily just, everything is just within yourself. And because you don't have all the answers, it can't happen. No, share the dream with other people. Let them know what you want to do, because you never know what resources are available to you. And be able to know the times and the season. I love how you were like, everything just basically kept pointing that this is the time to do it. There are windows in life, and this is actually something that my mom is even like telling me now in regards to my own life, that there are seasons for things. And when the door is open to do something, take advantage of it, because that opportunity may not come around another time. So when something is available for you to do it, do it. And I love that. And I could imagine the commitment, a year. Mind you, you're doing all this other stuff. You're traveling, you're doing running, you're working. Like, what encouraged you to keep going? Because a year is a long time. It could be easy to be like, you know what? Yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. What encouraged you?
So this is something I haven't really shared publicly about, sort of the origins of the album, but it's also another layer to the story. So the original title of the album was actually going to be called The Loneliest Number, not Prime. Two totally different titles. And I'm sure, looking back on it, my producer, when I told him, hey, I want to make this album, it's called The Loneliest Number, he probably was like, whoa, what is going on? And one of the songs on the album, it's an interlude, it's called The Loneliest Number. And at the time that I started working on the album, I also was at a very low place in my life, struggling in the thick of depression. I had hit 5 years of living in Dallas, and I've lived by myself the whole time I've been in Dallas. I've been single for the most part, spent my entire 20s living away from my family. And really up until that point, working in jobs that were just okay. I didn't really like them. There were things I liked about them, but the day in, day out aspects of the jobs really, really drained me. And I had gotten ghosted by someone that I was really interested in. So depression was really consuming me at that time. And I can't remember when I wrote Loneliest Number, but I knew that would eventually be part of the album. And there is an undercurrent, I think, of sadness in some of the songs. And so when you asked me what kind of encouraged me to keep going, it really was therapeutic for me to work on the album. It was part of my healing and processing what I was feeling. And I knew that there was going to be something on the other side if I could finish the project. Like, it almost felt as if I couldn't access the next level of my life until I had finished this album, because I needed to process. I needed to grieve whatever life I thought I was supposed to have by now. That's what the album did for me. And of course, at some point in the process of working on what was formerly The Loneliest Number, I ended up with an album called Prime. How did that happen? Well, I wrote a song called Prime about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 months into working on the album. And that's also around the time when I started seeing signs that, wait a minute, I think the album is supposed to be called Prime, because I started seeing new businesses named Prime. I would go out for a run and I would literally just, like, random things would just say Prime on it. And I vividly remember I was at a conference earlier this year and I could not find a pen to write with anywhere in my bag. I was trying to take notes. And finally I found a pen at like the bottom of my book bag. And on it said Prime Psychiatry. And I was like, Prime Psychiatry? And then I remember that was the name of the psychiatrist, first time going to the psychiatrist that I went to when I was like in the peak of my depression the previous summer. And I was just like, wait, I think the album is supposed to be called Prime. And it was just like a full circle moment being able to look back and say, wow, like I remember how depressed I was when I first started writing this album, and I literally went to Prime Psychiatry. Now I have a song called Prime, and I think my album is going to be called Prime as well. And just reflecting on the journey of healing that had already taken place up until that point. But yeah, all that to say that is what kept me going, is knowing that the album was healing me from the inside out, and that one day it would hopefully speak to and heal others.
And that was a lot of the responses, especially at the party. I mean, we had friends saying that they cried listening to some of your music, that it touched them, and it impacted them in the best way. So I believe it did do what it intended to do, and it's going to continue to help people heal. And I think for me, it's just so inspiring. Like I remember when you said like, oh, like first when you came out with your single on 29, when you turned 29 and you released it, I was like, man, that is so cool. And she was like, I have an album coming out, by the way. I was like, what? You have a whole album? And just being able to at least witness the process of towards the end of it, you building that album was so amazing and so inspiring. So I just love that even in you doing the work that you feel called to, it was also healing to you as well. And it's like, I don't know, there's just like something that I'm thinking about right now, that sometimes even in the work that we're called to, it doesn't always feel like all that great. It's not always something that's like, oh, because I used to think, when it comes to like working on your like purpose or your passions or whatever it is that you're called to, that it's always going to feel like amazing. But sometimes just in the process of doing it, it can be healing, even if it can be tough. Because I'm sure, like you said, you're driving like an hour to and fro to go to your producer's house. You're still working your job, especially I know you had a previous job that was really, you know what I'm saying?
Really stressful.
Very stressful. And you were still able to maintain, because I think you saw the bigger vision of what you needed to do. And then also for you as well, internally, how it would heal you. So definitely
and
inspiring.
It's funny because
yeah.
Thank you so much. And people always ask me like, what was the hardest part about making the album? It wasn't driving to and from Fort Worth every week, or all the hours put in the studio. Like, I think it was the emotional part. In order to have made those songs, I had to listen to them and sit with them over and over and over and over again. I've probably heard each song on the album at least 500 times before it got released. And not only are you sitting re-listening to the words, but even when you go in the studio to sing and record, you have to put yourself back in the mindset that you were in when you first wrote those lyrics, right? In order to channel that emotion. And then as you're re-listening to the early versions of the songs, figuring out, okay, well, what is this missing? Like, I Won't Be Dreaming Tonight, for example, once I realized it was missing a violin, right? I had listened to it so many times before I was like, you know what, this needs a violin. And then trying to figure out what should the violin sound like, right? But there is such emotional labor that comes with having to re-listen to songs that were difficult to write or channel difficult emotions. To this day, certain songs make me cry on the album. No matter how many times I listen to it, that honestly is the hardest part, is facing those lyrics, those emotions that are captured in the songs.
Right. And if you listen to the album, which I will be linking it in the show notes, you can find it basically anywhere that you can find music, and especially it's on Spotify as well. You'll be able to hear that, especially when you listen to the lyrics and you hear her sing. You can definitely feel that it comes from a deep place. And at the same time, it's like, man, we appreciate you for basically bearing it all for the world and being so vulnerable. And yeah, it's just so cool. Seeing it, witnessing it, and it's just an amazing thing. So definitely, guys, like, I will post that album in the show notes for you to take a listen. And in you creating this album, this is actually a question that I personally had for you because I'm like, let's talk about this. How did you fund this project? And I love that I
Mm.
asked you about this, and you're like, you really had to think about it. Like, how did you do it? Because, and I think this is an important question because I know there's somebody listening, and they're like, they have dreams, they have something they want to do. Maybe they want to create an album, and the first thing that causes the stress or makes people just be like, you know what, forget about it. I'm not going to do it. Is finances,
Mm.
and that can be a big deterrent and can make people feel like think smaller or not dream as big because they feel they don't have the finances. So, and
Mm.
I think you noticed that I call you my rich friend. I'm not sure. I think you know this or not, but it's my rich friend. Because like you are just so good when it comes to finances, but just share, like, how did you fund this whole thing and your party as well?
Yeah. Um, well, I would be remiss to not mention that I do have a decent salary. I am not rich like Dami says. But I do have a decent salary, and that could honestly be a whole nother episode of how I've been able to move up in my career, and make certain career jumps in order to get to where I'm at. But even when I wasn't making the decent salary and was just starting out, I've always been a systematic saver. And so every paycheck, currently, I put $250 into what I call a sinking fund, which is essentially my savings account. But I call it a sinking fund because it's savings that they're short term. I know that eventually I'm going to withdraw from it. I don't know what for. Could be for a trip, could be for a music festival, or some, big fun expense, right? And this is completely separate from an emergency fund. But I have always had, since I started working back in 2018, the sinking fund that I just systematically put money into. And at times, the amount of money I put into it each paycheck has varied, but currently it's 250, which means that um, every four paychecks, so every 2 months, I'm able to save $1,000, right? So that has been very helpful in funding uh, not just this project, but some of the other random things I find myself getting into, and I want to make sure I spike that out. And then also, I think it's important to not be scared to ask. When I started working with my producer, I knew it was going to be a journey. And before I even like asked him what his terms were or anything like that, I was like, hey, would it be possible for me to pay as I go? I don't know if that's the normal arrangement. Um, and I was like, if we can agree upon a set price or you give me an estimate of how much you think it will cost, because for something like an album, it may not make sense economically to pay per hour by the studio time. You might negotiate an upfront, like all in price, 3,000, 4,000, whatever it is. And that includes the studio time. And then I just kept like a ledger. Like I literally, every time I got paid, I created this little table that I shared with him in a Google Doc, and I would Zelle him the money and note the date that I paid and keep track of the total until finally it added up to the total amount that I owed him. And that was an arrangement that he was more than okay with. So sometimes it's a matter of like asking. You'd be surprised how flexible people are and how willing they are to work with you if, in fact, you can't afford the upfront cost of something or the initial deposit. I literally would pay him like $100 every time I got paid, which was manageable for me once I had already paid him some of the upfront portion from my sinking fund. And I think that was important. And then I think overall, just general solid money management. I already wasn't spending everything that I earned. So I also was able to just use some leftover money from my checking account that I wasn't spending, because I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. And that also helped not only fund the album, but I think the album release party. And once it became apparent to me that I was like, wait, I think I'm going to have a party for this. Because people were asking me before the album had even came out, are you going to have an album release party? Are you going to have an album release party? And I was like, okay, I guess I have to do this then. And so again, going back to the sinking fund, because by then I had paid off the album and I was like, okay, I'm finally starting to build back up my sinking fund. Guess I'm going to have to use it again for this album release party. But I was able to make that work. And I also found ways to get creative in how to make some of the money back. So as you observed from the album release party, I sold t-shirts, which I got at a discount and was able to sell for more than what I paid for them. I also sold posters. I had some stickers. So that was one way to help get some of the money back. That was pretty helpful. There was one other point I was going to mention. I think also not being afraid to spend the money. I think there are some people who do have the money in savings, but feel like, okay, this, like, I can't touch it. And I've always had like a earn and burn mentality when it comes to those things, and within reason, but not hoarding that money. Like this is the purpose of it, right? It's a sinking fund for a reason. I want to deplete it. Some people think of their sinking fund as an extension of their emergency fund, but no, this is literally my money to do the things that make me feel alive and excited. And I will happily drain that fund and build it back up just to drain it again, because that's what the sinking fund is for me.
Right. So why I call you my rich friend? Okay. Because at the end of the day, girl, you still, all that you said, yeah, you still my rich friend. And this is why I say this. I look at you and I'm like, okay, you're somebody who's very intentional about how you spend your money. You don't spend your money on just anything. You are intentional about what you value and you spend there. And then the word is retract. That's not the word I want to use, but basically like you're not as generous with the areas that you just don't really care about. And you're aware of that. You understand what you value. One. Two, another thing that I'm hearing from you is, and that I've observed, is you're a woman of the future. And when I say that, I mean that you're a woman who thinks farther than just today, farther than just what you can see. You are planning, like you have a sinking fund. You intentionally do it because you're like, there's going to be opportunities that I want to take hold of in the future. And in order to do that, I'm going to need that cash. So how can I get that cash? I can put money aside every single paycheck just so I can have fun, because you value being able to have fun and to have your passions or explore your passions. And then a third thing that I noticed that, as you were speaking, and that I've also witnessed as well, is you don't spend everything that you earn. And that's why I call you my rich friend, because you have certain guidelines around how you spend your money. You kind of have a plan as to, okay, this is what I'm going to do with the money once I get it. And that allows you to be able to, again, live out these passions and do these amazing things. Because that was definitely one of the questions that I asked you. We were just on a boat a couple of weeks ago, and I said, but for real though, tell me for real, be honest with me. How did you do it when you have all the other things that you have to pay for in your everyday life? How did you fund it? And you're just like, yeah. And I think you also mentioned, like, when it came to, as you continue to get higher in your career, whenever you got either a salary jump or bonus, you also used that, like, you allocated that money as well. You didn't just spend everything. That's why I say that you're a woman of the future. And that I will do a podcast on that, I think, at another time. And if that's something that you guys want to listen to or want to know more about how to become a woman in the future, I'm going to talk about that. And ultimately, a woman of the future is somebody, one of the characteristics is you can be able to make decisions now that will benefit you for later. And they may be hard decisions, all right? It's not easy. It would be easy to I want to spend that $250 on other things like right now. But you understand that in the future, based off of the type of personality and person that I am, I'm going to be able to travel. I want to be able to go to a friend's wedding in a different country. I want to be able to do, X, Y, Z. I'm probably going to need to plan for that. So yes, there may be that little pain of, oh, I have to take this money out now or I can't spend it all. But the future joy that you will have because you're prepared to be able to take on those opportunities outweighs the current struggle and pain. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think a big thing too is like avoiding lifestyle inflation.
Mm,
So even as I have moved up in my career, I've been able to make more money. That doesn't mean that I now need to spend
right.
significantly more money, just as I make more. And something that my dad told me early on in my career when I was in a role I didn't really like, um, and I was like, Dad, I don't know, like I wish I liked my day job more. And he always encouraged me that even if your day job is not your passion, and you don't wake up excited every day to go into an office, it can be the vehicle through which you're able to pursue your passions and your hobbies and the things that do get you excited. And so don't take that day job for granted. Like figure out what you need to do to squeeze out every penny of that day job, because that ultimately is what could fund your next passion project or hobby. And so it's very important to not lose sight of that as you do start making more and more money, to realize, wait a minute, like this income is what's going to help me do this other thing that I want to do, and I need to make sure I'm setting aside a portion of that income so that way, whether it's now or in the future, I'm positioned to go off and do the things that I know I want to do.
Right. Yep. Sounds about right to me. Yeah, I love
Same as
that
well.
advice and being able to help or your dad giving you that advice, especially at the beginning of your career and letting that shape your decisions. I think that's great.
Mhm.
But yeah, I do have some questions for you. Actually, a listener question, or actually two, from somebody that listens to the podcast that they wanted to ask you. As you're growing and doing all the amazing things that you're doing, the first question is, what advice would you give your younger self? What's something that you would tell your younger self?
That is a good question. I think something I would tell my younger self: stay close to God. I think there were so many times when I drifted away and let all the hustle and bustle and excitement of life just take me in different directions, which then caused me to stray away from my values. But I think just stay close to God, through prayer, through reading the word, through fellowshipping with other believers. I think that would have helped me to avoid just silly mistakes I made in my early 20s. Um, and then I think just to place a high value on myself. I think at times it may not always feel like you are the strong, capable, beautiful, smart, talented, etc. person that other people say you are. And I think there were times where like I knew I was those things, but I didn't fully believe it. And because of that, I didn't always carry myself in that way. And as a result, I wasn't mindful of how I spent my time, who I spent it with, the things I gave my energy to. And so I just wish I would have believed those things for myself about who I was and placing a high value on me, because it really took me until later in adulthood to realize my worth is not tied to my grades, my job, my relationship status, my income. Those things don't define the value of the woman that I am, and what I'm capable of. So I think those are the two things that are coming to mind that I would have told my younger self.
And then, what do you wish you would have done sooner?
I wish I would have taken music seriously. I feel like it's a talent that I've always put on the back burner, because throughout my life, and even up until recently, like I always thought that I couldn't really sing that well. And it's crazy because now I've released an album. Um, but part of that is I was surrounded by a lot of singers growing up who had these really strong powerhouse voices, and my voice didn't sound like theirs, right? It's like if you were to put Janae Aiko next to Beyonce. Both amazing singers, but they have two totally different sounds, totally different voices. And if you're Janae Aiko and you're surrounded by a bunch of Jennifer Hudsons and Beyoncés and Whitney Houstons all your life, you may think that you can't sing and that there's no space for you as a singer. And I think for a while that's how I felt. And this is just even with being in choir and in music my whole life. And so I pushed that talent to the side. And for the longest would even tell myself that I couldn't really sing, or anytime I had to sing in front of other people, I would sort of preface it by letting people know that I wasn't the best singer, or just kind of like lowering everyone else's expectations. So that way, if I messed up, they wouldn't be caught off guard. But I just wish I would have been like, you know what? My voice sounds the way it sounds. Somebody's going to like it. I like it. And I'm writing these songs that suit my voice, and there's impact there. And I'm just going to give it all I got. And if the only person who listens to it is my family and me, that's okay with me, because it makes me happy and it feels like something I'm supposed to be doing. So yeah, I just wish I would have leaned in more to singing and songwriting and performing earlier.
Oh my goodness. Love that advice. Both of those answers, so helpful. And thank you so much for sharing, and sharing your story here, and what influences you, and what you would have done before. Very helpful. So thank you so much for sharing. And how can the audience connect with you? Where can we find you on the internet?
You can find me on my Instagram at Vinessa95, and that's Vinessa with an I, so Vinessa 95. You can also find me on YouTube that way too, youtube.com/Vinessa95, and you can stream my debut album, Prime, anywhere you get your music, whether it's Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal. It is everywhere. My stage name, which is also my real name, is Vinessa Burnett. Again, Vinessa with an I after the V, and then Burnett, Burnett, anywhere you get your music.
Nice. Great. And we'll have that in the show notes, so people can definitely click away and listen to your album, follow you on social, and just keep up with you. So this has been an amazing time and conversation, and I feel like this is going to encourage that person that's listening to take the leap, and to also encourage them they don't have to do this all alone, and just to also believe in themselves as well, and to do things that are well suited for them. So thanks again. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Thank you so much. All right, guys, if you loved this episode, share it with your friends, okay? If you can do that, I would love that. Share it with your friends. Let them know about this podcast and about this interview. So that's the first thing that I would love for you to do. And second thing that I would love for you to do, especially if you are watching this on YouTube, if you didn't know, this podcast is on YouTube as well, you can leave a comment and let us know what was one thing that stuck out to you throughout this conversation, or what was your takeaway from this conversation. So if you can do those two things, that would be amazing. So thank you so much for listening and tuning in, and I will speak to you on the next episode. Bye. Thank you for listening to the episode. If you enjoyed what you heard, please share with a friend and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also view the full episode on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you on the next episode.